Have you been in a place where you don't want to be? Maybe not now, maybe months ago, or maybe years ago, you found yourself in a place or in a country or in a situation in your life that you don't really want, but you don't have a choice. Probably some movements in the family. Maybe your father was assigned abroad and you were tag along with your parents, and all of a sudden you found yourself uprooted from a place you called home, only to discover yourself in an unfamiliar place, and you're struggling and you're adjusting, and you're in your heart, you're saying, I don't want in this place. Have you been in a place where you don't want to be? Maybe you're in Singapore. Actually, if you had a choice, you don't want to work in Singapore, but because of economic reason, we are in debt in the Philippines. That's why you were forced to travel to Singapore, leave your family in the Philippines just to find work in Singapore. And every day of your life as you wake up, you're saying in your heart, Panginoon, I don't like here, but I don't have a choice. I have to be here to work so that I can fulfill the dreams of my family. I can support my children. Have you been in a place that you don't want to be? Are you caught in a life situation that you don't like? Some tragedy or calamity happened, some problems happened, your parents were retrenched, or maybe you were laid off. Then why am I in this situation? I don't like this is not my fault. I was saying to my heart, the Lord reminded me, it happened to me personally. I was just hearing the stories of my parents many years ago because I was the youngest. I am the youngest in the family. So I only heard beautiful stories, but I no longer experienced those stories that my father, being a successful Chinese businessman, our family were doing well. But one day, my father came back home. He was being carried by a man, by his friend, because my father, he was playing bowling, and na-slide po yung father ko. There was this fracture in his bone. He was confined in the hospital, only to discover in the medical checkup na meron pala siyang bone cancer. When he entered the hospital, he was not able to get out. And he was the only one brilliant in the business of the family. So what happens to the business of the family started to get bankrupt until wala na po, napabayaan yung business. I found myself in Bicol, and I was caught in a life situation that I really don't like. I was young, I was saying, Lord, what happened? In a glimpse of an eye, the riches and everything and comfort was gone. I was sleeping on a table because my auntie owned a restaurant. We don't have a home. They had to wake me up 4:30 in the morning because the customers are coming and to eat. I cannot sleep on the table. And I would find myself putting chairs, 5 chairs, round chairs, stools, and I would lie down there because it's still 4:30 in the morning. And then you feel so sleepy at night, and you could not sleep because there are still customers eating. You're waiting until the last customers would leave, and then you can put your table again, and then you can sleep. What really happened, Lord? We were caught shocked and unaware of what happened, and it was a surprise. What do? You ask yourself why, and you start complaining. I was young, but I was complaining, Lord, what happened? You were brought from a familiar situation to an unfamiliar situation where you know you're not in control of anything, and in your heart you're crying. My older siblings got married. They were forced to get married, maybe because to escape the situation. You complain and you wonder, when will everything be back to normal? Are you in that situation? I'm sure I'm not the only one who experienced such kind of trials and difficulties in life where you are caught surprise. What happens? What do you do when God's plan is different from yours? You laid it all beautifully, only to be surprised. All of a sudden, you found yourself jobless, or you found yourself sick or whatever, and then you're asking what happened. What do you do when God's plan is different from yours? How I wish I read this verse before. For I know the plans I have for you. Plans to prosper you and not to harm you. Plans to give you hope and a future. How I wish when I was young that there was someone who would tell me, say, you rejoice, for I know the plans I have for you. How many of us have held on to this verse as our life verse, as our memory verse, as a verse that comforts us when we were in deep trouble and difficulties of our lives? But what happens if the plan of God is different from ours? This verse is probably one of the most misquoted verse verses in the Bible. So I want you to hold on to your seats because this verse is really far from our understanding. You'll find out that this verse means so much more. And maybe later on after the service, you may want to change your memory verse. Now, if there's one lesson, overarching big idea that I want you to capture, that I have learned as I reflected back in my own personal experience, and even in your own personal experience this morning, I think this truth will resonate in our minds and in our hearts, that God's best intent, His best purpose, His good plan is found and can be found even in the worst of life's event. God's best intent is found in life's worst event. Are you in your worst event are you going through a difficult moment or a difficult and worst event in your life, and you're complaining and you're looking for someone to point your finger to, and you're saying you are to be blamed? Are you in a difficult situation and you don't like that place and you're wondering when will the normal return? But I want you to know that even in the worst event of our lives, you can find God's best intent. Okay? Now, let's go to the background. I'll give you the background and the setting. The Babylonian captivity and exile of Judah was the setting of Jeremiah 29. Now, very, very important. I want you to listen very carefully because this will pave the way for us to understand the deep meaning of Jeremiah 29 verse 11. You know the story? Israel and Judah are two kingdoms. When the divided kingdoms of Israel is the northern part, the Samaria, the Galilee, the Judah, Jerusalem, these are two kingdoms. The Assyrians came and conquered the Israelites in the north and defeated them and brought them as slaves. They tried to conquer Judah. Remember Hezekiah who prayed and the Lord killed 185,000. So the Assyria did not succeed in conquering Judah. So they returned. They all ran back to Nineveh. Now, the Judah part was also after some time, because of their stubbornness, because of their rebellion, and because there were the idolatry and pride, God allowed and opened the way for the Babylonian to enter. King Nebuchadnezzar entered and captured Judah, the kingdom of Judah. You know the story if you are familiar with the Old Testament. That's why Daniel, Shadrach, Meshach, and Abednego were brought to Babylon. Yeah, those were the stories and the contemporaries of what's happening. So this is the setting of Jeremiah 29. The Israelites, Judah, were brought back to Babylon. They marched 700 miles in the desert. Can you imagine? They were led in captivity. They don't have a choice. The Babylonian came and they were ruthless. They destroyed the temple and everything and brought them back to Babylon. Babel. You know, the Babylonians selected leading people in the city and left the farmers. They left the ordinary people in Judah or in Jerusalem. So this is the strategy of the Babylonians. Why? Because they want them to farm so that they can produce and continue to supply and give back to Babylon. But they get all the talented, all the learned and educated and the leaders in Jerusalem and brought them back to Babylon. But interestingly, Jeremiah was left behind. Maybe Jeremiah was not considered as a good leader, but he was the true prophet of God. He was left in Jerusalem where Daniel, Ezekiel, and all of the prophets were there in Babylon. Jeremiah was left in the ruins, in the rubbles in Jerusalem, and he saw the tears of widow and orphans and the killings, and he would write. That's why he wrote the book of Lamentations. Lament means crying, deep crying. They found themselves in Babylon. Exile is traumatic and terrifying. I've never been exiled like the Israelites. But in similar events, later on we will understand that we all experience exile. You know why? Exile is traumatic because can you imagine? Imagine with me for a while. Let's imagine for a while that all of us were the Jewish people that were brought to Babylon. Can you imagine with me? All of us were brought to Babylon. This is Babylon. And all of a sudden, you don't have a temple. You don't have the temple. You don't have the songs. You don't have all the food. And all of a sudden, the people around you have different accents. And their colors are different. The weather is different. The food is different. And all of a sudden, you're saying in your heart, you were brought to a place that you don't like. but you don't have a choice. All of a sudden, the Lord changed, rearranged your life, and you found yourself in a place, or you are caught in a situation that you don't really like and you don't want, but you don't have a choice. What do you do? Of course, the Jewish people started murmuring, complaining, what are we doing here? The essential meaning of the word exile is that we are where we don't want to be. Maybe you are here and you're in your heart, you're rebelling. I don't like in Singapore. Are you in that situation? You're complaining. So they were in Babylon and they were complaining and they were murmuring. Some prophets and priests started preaching false hope to the Israelites, to the Jewish people in Babylon. Diba, if you have a problem and here comes your friend consoling you, you have a problem, don't worry, I will pray for you. Don't worry, Jeremiah 29, for the Lord, the plan of the Lord is good for you, not to harm you. Then we quote, maybe these priests, these prophets started preaching and say, hey, do not worry. They were comforting the Israelites or the Jewish people in Babylon. Don't worry, we are only here for a moment. Actually, the false prophets were saying the exile would end soon. Don't worry, don't panic. Everything will be back to normal. Actually, they said, in 2 years, we will all return to Jerusalem. So can you imagine if we were the Jewish people in Babylon and we say, 2 years lang naman pala. These false prophets started preaching and misleading people that, hey, we are going back. Don't cry. Do not. What is the effect of this? So people would not, anyway, let's just wait. Anytime we will be back to normal. So that was the feeling of the Jewish people in Babylon. Then a letter came from Jerusalem. Now, I want you to hold on to your breath. Imagine we are all the Jewish people in Babylon. There is a general meeting. Why? Because there is a letter coming from Jerusalem for all of us to hear from Jeremiah. Everybody were excited. Maybe they were thinking, ano kaya nangyari? Maybe news. What happened to this person? What happened to the temple? Because we were separated from our homeland. And they were all wondering, what good news, what chismis is going to happen? What can we hear? What happened to our governor there? What happened to Jerusalem and the beautiful places? So they all gathered in one community because there was a letter. I want you to pay attention and feel when they heard the letter from Jeremiah. Here's Jeremiah. This is what the Lord Almighty, the God of Israel, says to all those I carried into exile from Babylon, from Jerusalem to Babylon. And if you were there, if I was there, dito palang hulog na ako sa upuan eh. Ay si Lord pala ang dahilan. It is God who brought us here. Remember, it is because of the sin of Israel, that's why they were brought there. So God is saying here in His sovereignty, saying, don't ever think because of Nebuchadnezzar or because of the cruelty of this king or because of the futility of your king in Jerusalem that you were here. No, I was the one who brought you into exile. So God is establishing here His sovereign power. Nothing happens without my approval. Actually, I was the one who carried you. So this is a form of punishment and discipline for His own people. Then He said this, build houses, settle down, plant gardens, and eat what they produce. When I came to this verse, I said, what? Did we hear it right? Build houses. There is an implication that they are not slaves in Babylon because they can build houses. Build houses, it takes time to build houses. Did we hear it right? Ay sabi ng prophet, what the prophet would say 2 years lang, why is God telling us to build houses and plant gardens and eat what they produce? Can you imagine what they were feeling? They were probably looking at those prophets standing on the side who preached to them and tell them, no, don't worry. This exile will end soon. In 2 years' time, we'll go back for the Lord's good. The Lord is good to you. And the Lord said, build houses and settle down. It means you are staying in Babylon for a while. How would you accept that if somebody you're praying and you are in a situation and the Lord speak to you, anak, the suffering that you are in right now, that will last for a long, long time. So I want you to settle. That I will not take you out from your situation in the near future. What would you feel, brothers and sisters? Build houses and settle down. They don't want to settle down in Babylon. They're looking forward. There is no temple here. read the Psalms, the Babylonian would tease them and say, sing for us the song of Yahweh. And then the Israelites would say, how can we sing the song of the Lord in a foreign land? And they were lonely and they were looking forward to be brought back to Babylon. And here comes God saying, no. Build houses, settle down, plant gardens, and eat what they produce. What God is saying is, enter into the rhythm of the season of Babylon. Get to know farming. Get to know agriculture. Plant seed. Why? You will need them because you're not going away in the near future. They were shocked. Why? Because the false prophets told them, you're getting out in 2 years. Don't worry. So for them, they were not saving their money. They were not investing because anytime the Lord will bring us back. Look at the next verse. Marry and have sons. What? Marry and have sons. Daughters, find wives for your sons and give your daughters in marriage so that they too may have sons and daughters. Increase in number. Do not decrease. When I read that verse, I said, what? Can you imagine if you were part of the Jewish community saying, is that true? Is that God speaking? Increase there, do not decrease. What God is saying, live a normal lives in Babylon. Send your kids to school. Go to the normal routines of life. Also seek the peace and prosperity of the city to which I carried you into exile. The word peace is shalom. For the Jewish people, shalom is only for Israel and Jerusalem. And God would say, seek the peace and prosperity of Babylon. What? For them, that's unbelievable. Enjoy Babylon because that will be your city for a while. Pray to the Lord for it. What? Should we pray for our captors? Maybe we have the same kind of experience. You are in Singapore, you're murmuring, I don't like the Singaporeans here. They mistreated me. And you don't pray for them. But here comes God saying, pray for them. Pray for your employer. Pray for the city. You see that? Because if it prospers, you too will prosper. What a rebuke for the Israelites and the Jewish people in Babylon. Pray for the city of Babylon. Why? Because if it prospers, you too will prosper. So as people of God, we are to pray not only for our country, but for the place where God has put you. Even if how cruel people are around us, it is our calling to pray and seek the shalom and the wholeness and prosperity of the place. Yes, this is what the Lord Almighty, the God of Israel says. Do not let the prophets and diviners among you deceive you. So I could imagine, the prophets were standing on the left side and they were all looking at the prophets. Sabi niyo, you told us 2 years lang. Can you imagine the commotion in that community gathering where all the prophets and priests who were standing there were there and they were all embarrassed, being read and said, yes, do not listen. Do not let the prophets and the diviners among you deceive you. Do not listen to the dreams you encourage them to have. At this portion, I could hear there were commotions in the gathering. If you read the whole chapter, they even wrote back to Jerusalem and said, why did you let Jeremiah write this letter? Pakulong nyo yan. Pinakulong si Jeremiah. Look at the next verse. They are prophesying lies to you in my name. I have not sent them, the Lord declares. The letter of Jeremiah was being read, and there were commotions, I believe, in that moment of gathering. And they were saying that Jeremiah is a false prophet. And they were all murmuring. And then the Lord continued his letter, and he said this. This is the breaking point. This is what the Lord says. When 70 years, what? When 70 years are completed for Babylon, I will come to you and fulfill my gracious promise to bring you back to this place. I believe at this point, many people would kick their chairs and said, what? 70 years? This prophet said we were going to leave in 2 years. No, God said, you are going to stay here for 70 years. In other words, what God is saying, none of you will go home. All of you will die here. That's why God is saying, marry, increase, do not decrease. Because if you do not live a normal lives, no one will go back to Jerusalem. What a disheartening message you hear. What do you do when God's plan is different from yours? I could imagine people would cry and there were noise and weeping in the community. 70 years. And they were computing, how old are you, honey? 50? We cannot survive. It means to say, we are not going to see the fulfillment of the prophecy. That's why God is saying, build houses, plant gardens, marry, let your children get married. Do not decrease, increase. Why? Because if you do not live a normal lives, the remnant, no one, no more community and no more Jewish people would go back. Can you still breathe? Because the Jewish people could no longer breathe at that time. 70 years. How old are we today? Can you imagine? What if the Lord will delay your situations right now? What do you do if God's plan is different from yours? And then he said this verse. Okay, are you ready? Here's the verse. For I know the plans. Why? Because there was commotion. No. Lord, are you sure? Do you really know what you're doing? As if God is saying to the people of Judah, trust me, I know the plans I have for you. I was the one who brought you from Jerusalem to Babylon. I know what I am doing. Can you hear it? Can you feel God? I know the plans I have for you. Do not ever doubt. Do not ever question me. Why 70 years? God is saying, I know the plans I have for you because I plan it for you. Plans to prosper you and not to harm you. Plans to give you hope and a hopeful end. Don't worry. The end of the story is not you are not defeated. You will be the winner if you will follow my instructions. Do not decrease. Increase. Let your children pass the faith to them because the next generation will go back to Jerusalem to see the fulfillment of my promise. We can dwell on self-pity and say, hindi ko to kasalanan. Mamaktol ka, you will just sit down and say, this is not my fault. I don't like what's happening. I don't like my life now. You can stay in your self-pity or you can stand up, build houses, plant garden, and increase and seek prosperity, or you can stay where you are. We have a choice. But if you continue to follow God's instruction, He will prosper you. Because God said, my plans for you is not to harm you. Maybe not in your context. Maybe for your children's children. Mga kapatid, minsan ang plano ng Diyos is not really for us to see. Maybe we are the one that laid the foundation for our children to reap someday. But we can dwell in our self-pity and complain and murmur and say, this is not my fault. I don't like this situation. I don't like to sleep on tables. You can continue to complain and ask God, why is these things happening? Now you understand what that verse means. I know. As if God is saying, trust me. I know the plans I have for you because I planned it. And do not ever think that I abandon you, Israel. I am faithful to the covenant I gave to your forefather Abraham. I did not abandon you. God is as if saying, do not ever think because you're in a difficult situation that I already forgot you or I have forgotten you. No, I have plans and plans to prosper you. Whatever your situation, don't ever think that God abandoned you. You hold on because He is sovereign. He knows what He is doing in your life. Then, why then? Because two reactions. You can get out and complain and rebel against God. I don't like you. Yes. When you realize that I am true, you will call upon me. Yes, okay, go ahead. You want to rebel? You want to dwell in your self-pity? Go ahead. But when the time is right, when you are helpless and tired, you will come to me and you will call upon me, and God lovingly promised, I will listen to you. Wow! Israel now is discovering that God's presence is not only in Jerusalem, cannot only be found in the temple. God is also the God in Babylon. Minsan kasi, we are afraid, will God bless me in Canada? Will God bless me in Australia? Maybe you're afraid you're migrating. Will God bless me in America? Or will God bless me back to the Philippines? Yes, because the same sun that rises in Singapore is the same sun that sets in the other parts of the world. And then God said, you will seek me. And you will find me. Why? Kasi you will rebel. You will get away. The seeking means you will return. The repentant return. When you repent and return to me, you have to seek me with all your heart. And you will find me even in the most foreign land, even in Babylon. Because the Jewish people in those days, they thought that the presence of Yahweh is only found in Jerusalem. No. God is omnipresent. He is God in every corners of this world. You can pray to Him in any place in this world. You will seek me and you will find me when you seek me with all your heart. What an invitation and a promise for the Jewish people. I know some of you would rebel. Some of you would not accept 70 years of waiting. Look at the next verse. I will be found by you, declares the Lord. Don't worry. I will bring you back from captivity. Look at this. Kapag natutunan nyo na to seek me, after your stubbornness, you come back to me crying and repenting and acknowledging my sovereign will and plan, I will be found by you. What a beautiful invitation. And look at the next verse. This promise is everlasting to the Israelites. I want you to listen carefully and look at the words carefully. The Lord said, I will gather you from all the nations. So, meaning to say, God is not only referring to Babylon, because this is not just the exile you will experience. There will come a time you will be scattered in Europe. In the modern days, you will be scattered in America. But don't worry, I will gather you from all the nations of the world and places where I have banished you, declares the Lord, and I will bring you back to the place from which I carried you into exile. This is a very meaningful promise for all the Israelites. That's why the Jewish people today are looking forward that they will be gathered back to Jerusalem in the fulfillment of God's promise. Jeremiah 29 verse 11 has been the verse. This chapter has been the guiding verses and passage of all the Jewish people. Tingnan niyo mga Hudyo ngayong panahon. Wherever the Jews are, they are prospering in business. In Cuba, you know what happened in Cuba? That's why they were all persecuted to return, because they were the one owning the businesses. In Germany, in Europe during those times, they solicited envy and hatred because they were prospering. Because they were applying what God said. Build houses, plant seed, prosper where you are, pray for the city, and they were all prospering. And they were just waiting for God to bring them back to their homeland someday. What do you think was the response of the Israelites, of the Jewish people? Some of them complain, some of them comply. If you read the entire chapter of Jeremiah 29, there was one prophet there who was so angry and wrote a letter back to Jerusalem and asked the king, why do you still allow this Jeremiah to rant? Put him into prison. That's why Jeremiah was persecuted back in Jerusalem, because the prophet was saving his face. At first, there were people who left the gathering and turned against God. That is not God's word. But there were some who complied and believed. And God was true to His promise. Then you will call upon me, and I will come to you, and you will find me, and you will seek me with all your heart, and I will be found by you. The choice was theirs, to keep on complaining or settle down and find out what it meant to be God's people in the place they did not want to be, Babylon. Just like what I have said, we can continue in murmuring. You can continue in rebelling to your parents and say, I don't like to be in Singapore. You are the one who wants here. So you are there and you're not helping in the house. You're failing in your grades and you're rebelling to your parents and say, I don't like to be in Singapore, mom and dad. I was already happy in America or in the Philippines and you uprooted me here. Yeah, well, young people, you can continue to do that. Or you can listen to God and say, I brought you there. You excel where I placed you. Or you waste your time. You don't know how until when. Maybe God has already laid 70 years for you. So you were just sitting for 70 years and you did not produce anything. It is your choice. You can stay and settle down and live what it meant to be God's people. They lost everything. The temple, the food, the music, all the golds in the temple, their worship were gone. They were stripped up of everything, only to discover what is important. They found God. Man shall not live by bread alone, but by every word that comes from God. You know, kapag tayo tinanggalan ng lahat ng ating karangyaan sa buhay, then and only then we discover that we don't really need those things. What we really need is God, the most essential in our lives. What do we have is God's presence and promises. Wherever we may be, wherever you may find yourself, God's presence is with you, just like He was with the Israelites and the Jewish people in Babylon. They were surprised that God, Yahweh, can also be found in a foreign land because they used to think that God is only present in Jerusalem. What do we have is God's presence and promises, and you hold on to God's promises. The ancient Israel exile was a violent and extreme form of what all of us experience from time to time. We experience exile. Can you imagine from our mother's womb, you feel at home for 9 months, and then all of a sudden you're out. What would the baby do? He would cry, she would cry, because from an unfamiliar to an unfamiliar situation, the weather is different. I would hear different accents. The light is so bright. The baby would cry until such time the baby would become accustomed to the new environment, and the baby would enjoy. Only after some time, when you reach 5 years old, your mom, remember this, your mom would bring you to nursery school. Whoa! That's an exile. I don't want to be here. I want mommy. Remember, those are experiences of exile. I would remember my son Jairel. Sorry, anak, where's my son Jairel? When Jairel was nursery, 1 week, I was sitting with my son because for him, it was a strange environment. Until such time, slowly, I'm just here. Okay, I'm just here. Until such time, I'm outside the door. I'm here. And then I'm gone. Because my son got used to the nursery. Only after some time, the primary school is a scary thing. And then you say, can I just go back to nursery? No. I remember Haniel is the only boy who was excited to go to school. He was not scared. He was the only one who we brought to school. He's okay. He's laughing and smiling. Only for 7 years. And then you got scared again because of the secondary school. I don't want there. I want to be in the primary school. No. Can you stay in primary school? No. After secondary school, you're okay. You get to know. You're the senior now in the class. You're Sec 4. You become the boss in your campus now, only for a while. Then you transfer to the polytechnic or junior college where you are not familiar and you're a stranger. And then here you are again, you're scared because you don't want to be in the place where you want to be. God would bring us from one exile to another because God is right. Make the best of your life wherever God has planted you. If God has brought you to Singapore, you don't know until when God would uproot you from Singapore. In the meantime, prosper in Singapore. Excel. If you're working at home, do your best. Cook the chicken rice the best way. Diba? Impress your employers. You're cooking chicken rice, but it tastes like bakote. Diba? You excel. You are working in a firm, in an office. You excel because you don't know until when God would move you. If God opens the door in Canada, or in Australia, or in New Zealand, or back in Chua Chu Kang, it's okay. But don't forget, my brothers and sisters, you will find God's best intent even in the life's worst event. How are you today? Where are you today? If I may say it right, maybe you are in a place where you don't like. Are you caught in a life situation, Pastor Butch, kung alam mo lang, I don't like here. I am here, but my spirit is already there. That's dangerous. Are you caught in a life situation that you don't like? Listen to God's word. God is saying, flourish wherever God has planted you. Bloom. Be fruitful and be productive. Because you don't know. Maybe God has a better plan. Or maybe God's plan will take a longer time. At least you did not waste time sitting down and complaining and murmuring and self-pitying. In the meantime, what God intends is for you and me to seek Him with all our hearts. Because when we seek Him, we will find God's best intent, even in the worst situations of our life. God is saying, trust me, anak, I know the plans I have for you. Seek me. Looking back, God's best intent in our families, even when we were adopted by my auntie 40 years ago, I can just smile I did not know that it would last for 10, 15 years for us. But I'm not afraid. Even if I don't have a bed, I can sleep on chairs. Because God trained me. I don't know of my sons, if they can sleep. Now we complain. I look back. That's why matipid ako in terms of money. Because I grew up, I know. But it's true. When you seek Him, you will find Him. Make the best of your situation. Flourish and seek God.